All right, everybody, welcome to Book by Book. And tonight we are going to be walking through Jeremiah 46 through 49. And so it is a longer section of scripture, but it has a consistent theme throughout. This is chapters 46 through 51 are considered a chunk. They are messages concerning foreign nations. Um, Last week, we looked at what is chronologically Jeremiah's last oracle. And so these last few chapters were messages that were given at various points in Jeremiah's prophetic ministry. And so none of these are necessarily tied down into chronological order even now. Um, Instead, they seem to follow a path of um, follow like of circling around it, Judah, and so they kind of go from the south in Egypt up, and then to the east and the west today, and then next week, uh, chapters 50 and 51 are focused on Babylon in particular. And so we'll try to tackle the last three chapters next week um, in uh, in our study. And so while there is a lot of text tonight, they do have a consistent theme throughout, and so it might feel a little repetitive. And so that's one of the reasons why I kind of wanted to tackle all of these and kind of get the majority of the nations out of the way so we can spend more time with Babylon next week. So, one of the questions that comes up sometimes with the prophets is if their concern is the nation of Israel and Judah, then why do they have any messages to the nations at all, the other nations? And there's a couple different things that we could say about that. The first is these oracles to the nations are intended to demonstrate God's sovereignty over all of the earth. And so making a um, giving these messages talking about coming judgment and in some cases restoration for these nations is one of the ways that the people of Israel could be comforted in knowing that God is in control, and that the nations that are abusing the people of Jerusalem and Israel and the Jewish people, those nations that at one point abused God's people will also face judgment in time. And so that may be one of the things going on. Another thing to highlight is just um, the simple fact that the people of Israel they are not unique in their rebellion. And so while one side is like, yes, justice comes to these other nations, the other side is to recognize that the people of Israel, they had a lot of rebellion of their own that they had to deal with. And so the Lord is able to see the sins of all the nations, not just the people of Israel. And so that's one of the reasons why these things are here. And Jeremiah, they're collected here at the end. Um, probably because if it's Baruch who's the editor of Jeremiah, he may have um, put them all here in one place just so they're all together. In the composition of the book of Jeremiah, these oracles actually don't all show up in the same place. So like the text that we have is from the Masoretic tradition, and I know this is super exciting stuff. But the Masoretes were the Hebrew scribes, and so they had their own um, tradition and how they compiled the text. And so the English translations follow the Masoretic translation, and that Masoretic translation has also been largely confirmed in different books through the Dead Sea Scrolls. And so it's a reliable ancient text that we could say this is how these texts were uh, transferred through generations. The the Greek translation of the Old Testament, which we call the Septuagint, and if you're ever reading a commentary and you see LXX, that is shorthand for the Septuagint. It's the Roman numeral for 70. And because there were 70 scholars who helped compile and translate the Greek Old Testament translation and from Hebrew into Greek. And that translation, the Septuagint, actually takes these oracles and puts them in different places earlier in the text that are more chronologically connected. And so, regardless of where they are in the text, Jeremiah, these are words from Jeremiah to the nations. And so, anyway, that was a lot of preamble. So let's jump in here with Jeremiah chapter 46, and we're going to go 46, 47, 48, 49. We're going to try to get them all. So verse 1, this is the word of the Lord that came to Jeremiah the prophet concerning the nations. And he starts with Egypt in verse, we'll look at 2 through 12. Concerning Egypt, this is the message against the army of Pharaoh Necho, king of Egypt, which was defeated at Carchemish on the Euphrates River by Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, in the 4th year of Jehoiakim, son of Josiah, king of Judah. Prepare your shields, both large and small, and march out for battle. Harness the horses, mount the steeds, take your positions with helmets on. Polish your spears, put on your armor. What do I see? They are terrified. They are retreating. Their warriors are defeated. They flee in haste without looking back, and there is terror on every side, declares the Lord. The swift cannot flee, nor the strong escape. In the north by the river Euphrates, they stumble and fall. Who is this that rises like the Nile, like rivers of surging waters? Egypt rises like the Nile, like rivers of surging waters. She says, I will rise and cover the earth. I will destroy cities and their people. Charge, you horses. Drive furiously, you charioteers. March on, you warriors, men of Cush and Put who carry shields, men of Lydia who draw the bow. But that day belongs to the Lord Almighty, a day of vengeance, for vengeance on his foes. The sword will deliver till it is satisfied, till it has quenched its thirst with blood. For the Lord Almighty, will offer sacrifices in the land of the north by the river Euphrates. Go up to Gilead and get balm, virgin daughter Egypt, but you try many medicines in vain. There is no healing for you. The nations will hear of your shame. Your cries will fill the earth. One warrior will stumble over another. Both will fall down together. All right. So this oracle is given in during Jehoiakim's reign in the 4th year. So this is pretty early in Jeremiah's ministry. And he's talking about this battle at Carchemish. And so I am going to try to share my screen here with you all so you can see the atlas that I am working with here. And so the Carchemish, as you can see, is way up here. And the Egypt is way down here. And so during Necho's reign, Egypt was trying to rebel against Babylon and fight against Babylon. And so they came up the King's Highway up to Carchemish and they fought the Babylonians. And this is the Euphrates here. And so they this battle, they thought they were strong. They thought they were going to be victorious. And what actually came about was this confusion and defeat for the people of Egypt. And so these, there's different elements of the description here where it's talking about all these different warriors from Cush and Put and Lydia. These are all folks, these are mercenaries who were a part of the Egyptian army. And so Cush is usually down here. And so they were all coming and working, hired hands essentially by the Egyptian pharaoh to try to defeat the Babylonians, but they were defeated. And so here we read about a day of vengeance on the Lord's foes. And so part of that vengeance is this just from the fact that the people of Israel kept going back to Egypt for their security instead of trusting the Lord. And so Egypt is this message, this source of temptation um, and trying to turn away from God and his goodness. So so that's part of why we can see like this language of vengeance on his foes. And then in verse 11, where it says, "Go up to Gilead and get balm, virgin daughter Egypt." This balm is um, world famous medicinal balm that um, is mentioned in other extra biblical texts as well. And so the sense here in this text is going to, let me show you where Gilead is. Zoom in a little bit. I saw it when I zoomed in. It should be right in here. Um, Regardless, the ball, like the sense in what the Lord is saying here is, go and try to get this medicine that helps with so many other things, but it's not going to be enough for you. It's not going to do the work that you are hoping it will do. And so it continues on in chapter 46, verse 13. And I'm going to read through 24. And I want to just, as we start here, just bear in mind there are place names that I'm going to have a hard time pronouncing. All right. So we're in Egypt. So I'll just take us over to Egypt. Uh, this is the message of the Lord. The Lord spoke to Jeremiah, the prophet, about the coming of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, to attack Egypt. Announce this in Egypt and proclaim it in Migdol. Proclaim it also in Memphis and Tahpanhes. Take up your positions and get ready, for the sword devours those around you. Why will your warriors be laid low? They cannot stand, for the Lord will push them down. They will stumble repeatedly. They will fall over each other. They will say, "Get up, let us go back to our own people and our native lands, away from the sword of the oppressor." There they will exclaim, "Pharaoh, king of Egypt, is only a loud noise. He has missed his opportunity." As surely as I live, declares the Lord, whose name is the Lord Almighty, one will come who is like Tabor among the mountains, like Carmel by the sea. Pack your belongings for exile, you who live in Egypt, for Memphis will be laid waste and lie in ruins without inhabitant. Egypt is a beautiful heifer, but a gadfly is coming against her from the north. The mercenaries in her ranks are like fattened calves. They too will turn and flee together. They will not stand in their ground, for the day of disaster is coming upon them, the time for them to be punished. Egypt will hiss like a fleeing serpent as the enemy advances in force. They will come against her with axes, like men who cut down trees. They will chop down her forest, declares the Lord, dense though it be. They are more numerous than locusts, they cannot be counted. Daughter Egypt will be put to shame, given into the hands of the people of the north. So here, as we are looking at the map, so Taphanes to Memphis. This is the Nile River is this body of water right here, going all the way down here. And so Taphanes is towards the north as they're coming down what would be a major thoroughfare road. So from here to Memphis is going to be conquered. But then also over here in Migdol, which may be behind me, Migdol, I don't know, they're going all over. Is what the message is saying. And so the power that is coming against them is overwhelming. And so the Lord is directing Babylon to come against Egypt, even though Babylon would not say the Lord is calling us to do this. This is just Nebuchadnezzar trying to, flex here and express his power. But the strength of this one who comes is like Tabor among the mountains, like Carmel by the sea. And these are significant and spiritual places for the people of Israel and on these mountains as well. Carmel is where Elijah had his encounter with the prophets of Baal. And so like try to move a mountain. The people can't. And that's like how strong this advancing army is going to be. And all of these places are going to be destroyed, much like the way the Lord talked about destroying Jerusalem and the region around Jerusalem as the Babylonians were coming. And so it's not that Israel is the only place that is experiencing the hardship that Babylon is bringing about. Um, and they've put all of their hope and their trust in their chariots and their mighty army, but a lot of their army is mercenary, and so they are not they're not going to fight the same way as if it is their own homeland. And in verse 20, we read about Egypt is a beautiful heifer. And so this may come to bring to mind the vision that Pharaoh had in the story of Joseph, where there's these seven cows coming up out of the Nile. Um, the cow is a sign of a heifer in particular is a sign of prosperity and blessing. And so it's like, yeah, Egypt, you look really great, but a gadfly is coming, and coming from the north, which is the direction that the Babylonians are going to come down through all of here, down to Taphanes and Memphis and Migdol to do this conquering work. And so this a gadfly is not very big, but they leave like they bite and they leave a welt, and this gadfly is going to be enough um, to take down the nation of Israel, because it's not just one, it's a whole flock of them, a swarm. That's the word when we're talking about bugs. A swarm of these gadfly, like locusts that cannot be counted, will come against the people of Egypt. So Nebuchadnezzar moved against Egypt in 601 BC, um, and they didn't totally defeat them at that time, and so it took another second invasion in 568 to ultimately uh, defeat Egypt. And so, yeah, so it was a long, drawn out time there, but the oracle remains that the people of Egypt, they would be brought low because of their own sinfulness and wickedness. Um, pick up in verse 25, the Lord Almighty, the God of Israel, says, I'm about to bring punishment on Ammon, god of Thebes, on Pharaoh, on Egypt and her gods and her kings, and on those who rely on Pharaoh. I will give them into the hands of those who want to kill them, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, and his officers. Later, however, Egypt will be inhabited as in times past. And so Ammon-Ra is the chief god in uh, the Egyptian pantheon. And so here, Yahweh, the God of Israel, the Lord Almighty, is saying like he's going to bring down their chief god, and that God and all of the people will be carried off into exile by the Babylonians. But it won't be forever. Later, Egypt will be inhabited as in times past. And so even in this message of judgment, there is a message of restoration and hope for some of these nations, as we're going to walk through this evening. And in the midst of this, in verse 27, we read a blessing, a message of assurance for Israel. It says, do not be afraid, Jacob, my servant. Do not be dismayed, Israel. I will surely save you out of a distant place, your descendants from the land of their exile. Jacob will again have peace and security, and no one will make him afraid. Do not be afraid, Jacob, my servant, for I am with you, declares the Lord. Though I completely destroy all the nations among which I scatter you, I will not completely destroy you. I will discipline you, but only in due measure. I will not let you go entirely unpunished. And so here, this message is, at the time that Jeremiah is giving this oracle, there were already some taken to Babylon, and there were some that had fled to Egypt. And so these exiles that the people are experiencing, the Lord's promise is to restore them as well. And so one of the interesting things that we're looking at in the way that this is compiled is Egypt is the ancient enemy of the people of Israel. And next week we'll look at Babylon, which was the current enemy, current like dominant enemy of the people of Israel. And both empires, the Egyptian Empire and the Babylonian Empire, have a significant amount of temptation and idolatry and danger for the people of Israel. And the Lord promises, just as he brought them up out of Egypt, he's going to bring them back out of exile. And so here we see the Lord's intention to bless and to restore his people. All right. Chapter 47 is shorter, and it is dealing with just Philistia, the Philistines. So verse 1, I'm going to read the whole chapter here. This is the word of the Lord that came to Jeremiah the prophet concerning the Philistines before Pharaoh attacked Gaza. This is what the Lord says. See how the waters are rising in the north. They will become an overflowing torrent. They will overflow the land and everything in it, the towns and those who live in them. The people will cry out. All who dwell on the land will wail at the sound of the hooves of galloping steeds, at the noise of enemy chariots and the rumble of their wheels. Parents will not turn to help their children. Their hands will hang limp. For the day has come to destroy all the Philistines and to remove all survivors. Who could help Tyre and Sidon? The Lord is about to destroy the Philistines. The remnant from the coasts of Caphtor, Gaza will shave her head in mourning. Ashkelon will be silenced. You remnant on the plain, how long will you cut yourselves? Alas, sword of the Lord, how long will you rest? Return to your sheath, cease and be still. But how can it rest when the Lord has commanded it, when he has ordered it, to attack Ashkelon and the coast? Um, all right, so as we're coming up out of this warning to the people of Egypt, the next nation that we're going to be interacting with is the Philistines. And the Philistines were a constant thorn in the side of the people of Israel throughout the time that they came into the land in the conquest and throughout the kings. The Philistines were a problem. They were largely located on the coast here. Their main organization was um, as 5 cities with independent kings, and they really just came together when they were fighting um, in warfare together. And so Gaza, Ashkelon, Ashdod, those are all, and Lachish is one. These were all major cities for the Philistines. And so the Egypt fought against Gaza here in 601, um, and um, and Babylon also in their pursuit, the Babylon came and attacked them as well in 601. And in 604, this is when the actual campaign from Babylon came against all of the Philistine cities. And so this flood, this metaphorical rising water from the north, is the infantry as Babylon like sweeps through Philistia and starts conquering this city or these cities. And so we get this message of the sword of the Lord, that there's a call to put the sword away, and that call could be from the people of Philistia. It could be from, Jeremiah saying, "Oh, could we just please stop with this sword of the Lord?" But the sword is going to do the work, and it's going to keep working until the work is done. And so, yeah, so Philistia being a major thorn in the side of the people of Israel for generations. This is, the sign, like a message saying like Philistia themselves will also be um, dealt with. So I'm going to keep going into 48 concerning Moab. Um, And so I'm going to read 1 through 10. This is what the Lord Almighty, the God of Israel, says. Woe to Nebo, for it will be ruined. Kiriathaim will be disgraced and captured. The stronghold will be disgraced and shattered. Moab will be praised no more. In Heshbon, people will plot her downfall. Come, let us put an end to the nations, to the nation. You come, you, the people of madmen. Will you also be silenced? The Lord will pursue you. Cries of anguish arise from Horonaim, cries of great havoc and destruction. Moab will be broken, her little ones will cry out. They will go up the hill to Luhith, weeping bitterly as they go. On the road down to Horonaim, anguished cries over the destruction are heard. Flee, run for your lives, become like a bush in the desert. Since you trust in your deeds and riches, you too will be taken captive, and Chemosh will go into exile. Together with his priests and officials, the destroyer will come against every town, and not a town will escape. The valley will be ruined, and the plateau destroyed because the Lord has spoken. Put salt on Moab, for she will be laid waste. Her towns will become desolate, with no one to live in them. A curse on anyone who was lax in doing the Lord's work. A curse on anyone who keeps their sword from bloodshed. So the Moabites throughout the Bible are painted in a, a dark light. They are the story of where the Moabites come from is Lot's daughters and the incestuous relationships that Lot's daughters had with him in order to conceive after their husbands were killed in the destruction of Sodom. And so they're not really ever painted as good people, but they had a decent land that was fortifiable. They were here in the southern region around the Dead Sea. And so the language here towards Moab is about the coming destruction and the sword again, and all of these places that they thought were going to be their sources of security are going to be destroyed, and they will not be the security that they thought uh, they would have in these places. And so one of the key pieces that I wanted to highlight is in verse 7. Chemosh is the god of the Moabites, and here we are told that Chemosh and all of his priests will be taken into exile by the Babylonians. And so the people thought that for sure Chemosh would keep them safe, but no, the gods of conquered nations were often taken by the conquering army. And so this is the same for them. Then we also are in verse 9, it talks about salting Moab. And that's a reference to sowing salt over ruins to pronounce a curse on the spaces, and that this is no longer a fertile place. The salt would be used to like sanitize the space, and so yeah, and so part of the curse as well is saying anybody who doesn't do this destructive work as the Lord is instructing them, they will also carry on with that curse. Continues against Moab in verse 11. Moab has been at rest from youth, like wine left on its dregs, not poured out from one jar to another. She has not gone into exile, so she tastes as she did, and her aroma is unchanged. But days are coming, declares the Lord, when I will send men who will pour from pitchers, and they will pour her out. They will empty her pitchers and smash her jars. Then Moab will be ashamed of Chemosh. I'm probably said that wrong, differently every time I'm realizing. And Israel was ashamed when they trusted in Bethel. How can you say we are warriors, men valiant in battle? Moab will be destroyed and her towns invaded. Her finest young men will go down in the slaughter, declares the Lord, whose name is the Lord Almighty. The fall of Moab is at hand. Her calamity will come quickly. Mourn for her, all who live around her, all who know her fame. Say, how broken is the mighty scepter, how broken the glorious staff. Um, so a lot of this message against Moab in this section, verses 11 through 12, are focusing on wine and using wine metaphors and imagery to communicate the judgment that's coming. And part of this is because Moab was a wine growing region. And so the way that Jeremiah is talking about the transferring of the wine to another container, if you don't do these different steps, the wine goes bad. And so what the Lord is saying is like you've just kind of been sitting there, and no one's been, maintaining you. And so here comes some judgment. And the day is coming when all that's going to be left is the dregs, the stuff that you don't want, the crushing of the grapes and the remnants of the grapes. That's all that's going to be left. And so they will, instead of pouring from pitcher to pitcher to preserve the wine, and they're going to smash the pitchers and jars and pour out anything good that may have come from Moab. And in verse 13, when it says Moab will be ashamed of Chemosh, as Israel was ashamed when they trusted in Bethel. And Bethel, in this instance, may be talking about the idols that were at Bethel when the kingdom split. There was a calf that Jeroboam built at Bethel and at Dan. Or there's also the possibility that Bethel is a name for a local idol, the local god that people were worshiping as well. But the same message is happening. Moab is falling, calamity is coming. And so that is the warning that is being put forth here. So it continues in verse 18. Come down from your glory and sit on the parched ground, you inhabitants of daughter Dibon. For the one who destroys Moab will come up against you and ruin your fortified cities. Stand by the road and watch, you who live in Aurora. Ask the man fleeing and the woman escaping. Ask them, what has happened? Moab is disgraced, for she is shattered. Wail and cry out. Announce by the Arnon that Moab is destroyed. Judgment has come to the plateau, to Holon, Yaza, Mephaath, to Dibon, Nebo, and Beth Diblathaim, to Kiriathaim, Beth Gamul, Beth Meon, and Kirioth and Basra, to all the towns of Moab, far and near. Moab's horn is cut off, her arm is broken, declares the Lord. And so this, again, is a message of destruction coming against the people of Moab down here in the south, and listing these different place names that we can see here. We've got Kirioth, we've got Dibon, Jahaz, Aurora, Basra, Zor. These are all places that are listed here. They're all going to be destroyed. The imagery here in verse 25, Moab's horn is cut off. The horn is often one of the ways that the ancient world talked about, like the king's crown. And so the horn is cut off. The glory, the majesty, the power of the kingdom is cut off. And so Moab is falling. Continuing on, verse 26. Make her drunk, for she has defied the Lord. Let Moab wallow in her vomit. Let her be an object of ridicule. Was not Israel the object of your ridicule? Was she caught among thieves, that you shake your head in scorn whenever you speak of her? Abandon your towns and dwell among the rocks, you who live in Moab. Be like a dove that makes its nest at the mouth of a cave. We have heard of Moab's pride. How great is her arrogance, of her insolence, her pride, her conceit, and the haughtiness of her heart. I know her insolence, but it is futile, declares the Lord, and her boasts accomplish nothing. And so continuing on, getting back to the wine and drunkenness imagery, in verse 26, you know, let Moab get so drunk and in her grief and her sorrow as the destruction is coming, that she wallows in her vomit. Let her be the object of ridicule. And part of the ridicule here is that Moab was often working against Israel. And in the book of Obadiah in particular, we see that as the invading nation is coming and Babylon is coming against Jerusalem, the people of Moab are cheering Babylon on, cheering on the destruction of the city. And so their ridicule is being turned back on the people of Moab. And so all their pride, all their arrogance, their certainty that they would be okay, the Lord is saying it's all coming back to you. In verse 31 through 39. Therefore, I will wail over Moab, for all Moab I cry out. I moan for the people of Kir Hareseth. I weep for you, as Jazer weeps, you vines of Sibmah. Your branches spread as far as the sea, they reach as far as Yazer. The destroyer has fallen on your ripened fruit and grapes. Joy and gladness are gone from the orchards and fields of Moab. I have stopped the flow of wine from the presses. No one treads them with shouts of joy. Although there are shouts, they are not shouts of joy. The sound of their cry rises from Heshbon to Elayla to Jahaz, from Zor as far as Horonaim and Elgath Shileshah. For even the waters of Nimrim are dried up. In Moab, I will put an end to those who make offerings on the high places and burn incense to their gods, declares the Lord. So my heart laments for Moab, like the music of a pipe. It laments like a pipe for the people of Kir Hareseth. The wealth they acquired is gone. Every head is shaved and every beard cut off. Every hand is slashed and every waist is covered with sackcloth. On all the roofs of Moab and in the public squares, there is nothing but mourning. For I have broken Moab like a jar that no one wants, declares the Lord. How shattered she is, how they wail, how Moab turns her back in shame. Moab has become an object of ridicule, an object of horror to all those around her. So the continuing message of destruction is coming. Continue, like even more of the metaphor of the fruits and the grapes and the orchards and the vines expanding to the sea. All of these different pictures of what was, fruitful and prosperous is now being brought low and destroyed. And so we read about the mourning that is happening here. And so playing the pipe, shaving head, cutting the beard off, people cutting their hands, wearing sackcloth. These are all images of people in mourning. And so that is what the Lord is communicating here that's happening. At the top of this section, therefore, I wail over Moab. This is different commentators were kind of debating on this. Who's I here? Is it the prophet wailing over Moab, or is it the Lord wailing over Moab? Is the Lord grieved by the destruction that is coming? And, if it is, that makes more sense because of the things that I says in this passage are things that the Lord can do and Jeremiah cannot do. And so when we think about the Lord wailing and grieving over the destruction of the nation of Moab, we have to remember that it is their pride that has brought this destruction upon themselves. Their arrogance has led to this destruction. So we continue on in verse 40. This is a long chapter. So verse 40 says, this is what the Lord says. Look, an eagle is swooping down, spreading its wings over Moab. Kerioth will be captured and the strongholds taken. And in that day, the hearts of Moab's warriors will be like the heart of a woman in labor. Moab will be destroyed as a nation because she defied the Lord. Terror and pit and snare await you, you people of Moab, declares the Lord. Whoever flees from the terror will fall into a pit. Whoever climbs out of the pit will be caught up in a snare. For I will bring on Moab the year of her punishment, declares the Lord. In the shadow of Heshbon, the fugitives stand helpless. For a fire has gone out from Heshbon, a blaze from the midst of Sihon. It burns the foreheads of Moab and skulls of the noisy boasters. Woe to you, Moab! The people of Chemosh are destroyed. Your sons are taken into exile, and your daughters into captivity. Yet I will restore the fortunes of Moab in days to come, declares the Lord. Here ends the judgment on Moab. So all of this destruction is happening, and this grief and this overwhelming force is coming against Moab. But even here, against this ancient enemy of the people of Israel, the Lord promises to restore the fortunes of Moab someday. And so, yeah, I just find that fascinating, that the Lord promises to restore them, and there's no reason. The Lord doesn't give a reason for just restoring the Moab someday, but this proud and arrogant nation will experience the discipline that is coming to them. And so, yeah, so that's the message to Moab. One more chapter, and this has a few nations that we're going to look at. And so the first one is the Ammonites in verses 1-6. This is what the Lord says. Has Israel no sons? Has Israel no heir? Why then has Molech taken possession of Gad? Why do his people live in its towns? But the days are coming, declares the Lord, when I will sound the battle cry against Rabbah of the Ammonites. It will become a mound of ruins, and its surrounding villages will be set on fire. Then Israel will drive out those who drove her out, says the Lord. Wail, Heshbon, for Ai is destroyed. Cry out, you inhabitants of Rabbah. Put on sackcloth and mourn. Rush here and there inside the walls, for Molech will go into exile, together with his priests and officials. Why do you boast of your valleys? Boast of your valleys so fruitful, unfaithful daughter Ammon. Will you trust in your riches and say, who will attack me? I will bring terror on you from all those around you, declares the Lord Almighty. Every one of you will be driven away, and no one will gather the fugitives. Yet afterward, I will restore the fortunes of the Ammonites, declares the Lord. So the Ammonites are up in this region here. And let's zoom in a little bit. We can see where AI was. I saw it earlier. All right. It's not showing up now for some reason, but whatever. Let me try this. 49. Nope. All right. So the Ammonites were this region here, a little bit more flat land, and as opposed to the Moabites, that was a lot more hilly and cavernous. And the people of Israel, on their trek into the land, they came up through the north to Midian and Ammon and came down across the river here at Jericho. And the people of Gad, Reuben, and the half tribe of Manasseh, they settled on this side of the Jordan River. And so there's a reference here to the people of Gad. Why then has Molech taken possession of Gad? And so the Ammonites had conquered essentially the people of Gad. And so Molech was their god. And like Chemosh, Molech himself will be carried off into the exile. And so again, the Lord is saying, you boast of your valleys, you boast of all these good things, but the Lord promises to carry their riches away, and they will be taken into exile. But verse 6, the Lord will restore the fortunes of the Ammonites. So an interesting reversal there as well. So we will keep going to Edom. Concerning Edom, this is what the Lord Almighty says. Is there no longer wisdom in Teman? Has counsel perished from the prudent? Has their wisdom decayed? Turn and flee, hide in deep caves, you who live in Dedan, for I will bring disaster on Esau all the time when I at the time when I punish him. If grape pickers came to you, would they not leave a few grapes? If thieves came during the night, would they not steal only as much as they wanted? But I will strip Esau bare. I will uncover his hiding places so that he cannot conceal himself. His armed men are destroyed, also his allies and neighbors. So there is no one to say, leave your fatherless children. I will keep them alive. Your widows too can depend on me. This is what the Lord says. If those who do not deserve to drink the cup must drink it, why should you go unpunished? You will not go unpunished, but must drink it. I swear by myself, declares the Lord, that Basra will become a ruin and a curse, an object of horror and reproach, and all its towns will be ruins forever. I have heard a message from the Lord. An envoy was sent to the nations to say, assemble yourselves to attack it, rise up for battle. Now I will make you small among the nations despised by mankind. The terror you inspire and the pride of your heart have deceived you, you who live in the clefts of the rock, who occupy the heights of the hill. Though you build your nest as high as the eagles, from there I will bring you down, declares the Lord. Edom will become an object of horror. All who pass by will be appalled and will scoff because of its wounds. As Sodom and Gomorrah were overthrown along with their neighboring towns, says the Lord, so no one will live there. No people will dwell in it. Like a lion coming up from the Jordan's thickets to a rich pasture land, I will chase Edom from its land in an instant. Who is the chosen one I will appoint for this? Who is like me and who can challenge me? And what shepherd can stand against me? Therefore, hear what the Lord has planned against Edom, what he has purposed against those who live in Teman. The young of the flock will be dragged away, their pasture will be appalled at their fate. At the sound of their fall, the earth will tremble, their cry will resound to the Red Sea. Look, an eagle will soar and swoop down, spreading its wings over Basra. In the days of the hearts of the Edom's warriors will be like the heart of a woman in labor. So here's Basra here. And so the Edomites were the descendants of Esau. And so it mentions here, is there no wisdom in Esau? And part of the tradition of the text, we learn that there is wisdom and wise teaching in the nation of Edom, and we learn about that partly from the book of Job, which we have not looked at yet in our study. But one of Job's friends is actually a Temanite, and he is known for his wisdom. And so the lack of wisdom is really lies in the way that they've been treating Israel, or their inability to see the coming trouble that's approaching for their own nation. And so Edom is going to experience this downfall. And again, like Moab, pride and confidence in their security from all their enemies is what is going to ultimately bring them down. And so, God is going to use these human agents to attack Edom and bring destruction to them. And when it talks about this eagle that's coming from the north, the eagle is a way to talk about Babylon coming and swooping down and taking the people. And so that is the message against Edom, is coming judgment again because of their pride. The next one in verse 23 is looking at Damascus, which is in the north, in Syria somewhere. Oh man, where would it be? Usually it shows up. So anyway, we'll read verse 23.
Yeah.
Hamath and Arpad are dismayed, for they have heard bad news. They are disheartened, troubled like the restless sea. Damascus has become feeble. She has turned to flee, and panic has gripped her. Anguish and pain have seized her, pain like that of a woman in labor. Why has the city of renown not been abandoned, the town in which I delight? Surely her young men will fall in the streets. All her soldiers will be silenced in that day, declares the Lord. I will set fire on the walls of Damascus. It will consume the fortresses of Ben Hadad. And so, yeah. So again, this is the surrounding nations around Israel. Syria, Damascus is up in the north region. And oh, there it is right there. Found it. Thanks. And so right here. And so it's yeah, so this is where this next destruction is coming. And again, similar kind of language. Like there's no way that they can protect themselves against what is coming against them. Um, all right. We're almost there, guys. The next one is to verse 28 concerning Kedar and the kingdoms of Hatzor, which Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, attacked. This is what the Lord says: Arise and attack Kedar and destroy the people of the east. Their tents and their flocks will be taken, their shelters will be carried off. With all their goods and camels, people will shout to them, terror on every side. Flee quickly. Stay in deep caves, you who live in Hatzor, declares the Lord. Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, has plotted against you. He has devised a plan against you. Arise and attack a nation at ease, which lives in confidence, declares the Lord. A nation that has neither gates nor bars. Its people live far from danger. Their camels will become plunder, and their large herds will be spoils of war. I will scatter to the winds those who are in distant places and will bring disaster on them from every side, declares the Lord. Hatzor will become a haunt of jackals, a desolate place forever. No one will live there. No people will dwell in it. So Hatzor and Kedar, these are Arab tribe in this northern Syro-Arabian area over here. And the message here again is the Lord is plotting against you. And as the people are living in tents and the flocks, we have this, they were, nomadic type people. And so they did not necessarily have the strong city walls that other nations may have had. They didn't have the natural defenses of hills and caves. And so the attack that's coming against them from Babylon is going to be overwhelming. And so their isolation and mobility gave them a sense of false security, like, oh, we can just get away from these things. Nobody's really paying attention to us. But all their wealth and their flocks are going to be taken away from them. All right. So then we have one more, the Elamites. And verse 34, it says, This is the word of the Lord that came to Jeremiah the prophet concerning Elam early in the reign of Zedekiah, king of Judah. And so this is towards the end of Jeremiah's ministry, because Zedekiah was the last king. This is what the Lord Almighty says: See, I will break the bow of Elam, the mainstay of their might. I will bring against Elam the four winds from the four quarters of heaven. I will scatter them to the four winds, and there will not be a nation where Elam's exiles do not go. I will shatter Elam before their foes, before those who want to kill them. I will bring disaster on them, even my fierce anger, declares the Lord. I will pursue them with the sword until they have made an end of them. I will set my throne in Elam and destroy her king and officials, declares the Lord. Yet I will restore the fortunes of Elam in the days to come, declares the Lord. And so the campaign against Elam took place in like 596, 595, and it is we know about this because the Babylonian Chronicles actually talk about it. But the place in the text where Elam may have been mentioned is kind of damaged. So they're kind of like piecing it together in the Babylonian Chronicles. And they were in much of the Iranian plateau. So as we look back here at the map, this is Babylon's right here, and Iran is up in here. And so they were kind of spreading out a bit. Um, but they were part of the um, Persian Median Empire. They were affiliated with Assyria. They were a global power and affiliated with different global powers at different points. And so Nebuchadnezzar is not a big fan of these other empirical powers, and so he's got a plot against them. They were known for their archers, and we actually uh, have reference to them in Isaiah 22:6. And so when God says he's going to break the bow, it's a reference to the sign of their military strength was their use of archery. And so the Lord is going to overcome their power and their strength through their archery. Um, and so as we're coming to landing the plane here on all of these different nations, the key to all of this is God's sovereignty and power over all of them is demonstrated. And we've seen talk about their people put their confidence in their natural fortifications, in their chariots, in their horses, in their bows, all of their wisdom, all of these things that they thought were going to save them. And the message throughout the oracles is no, that's not going to be enough. Their pride, their rebellion, all of these things, the Lord is saying He will bring them down because of their sinfulness. And Elam here, like a couple of the other nations, we also get this promise that the Lord will restore the fortunes of Elam in the days to come. And so we don't really get told why. That's one of the interesting things about all of this is we're never really told why the the Lord promises to restore these nations, but we do know why He's bringing them to discipline is because of their rebellion at different points. So we did it. We did it, y'all. We got through all of those nations, and next week we'll be focused on Babylon, and so we won't be kind of doing this Near East tour. But are there any questions for tonight's passages?
Oh, my face isn't showing. I got a question on here where it says back earlier, where it says, "Oh, virgin daughter Egypt."
Mm-hmm.
Usually, doesn't it say usually virgin daughter Israel?
Mm-hmm.
Because I was kind of thrown for a loop. I'm like, why did he reference them in the same way he references to Israel?
Yeah, that's a good catch. When I was the different commentators talking about that, they almost all landed on irony.
Oh, so it's kind of a cynicism?
Yeah, so they are going to go to Gilead to try to find some healing. There's nothing there for them, and so even talking about um, virgin daughter Egypt is like this is ironic. It's not necessarily the Lord's love for them as much as they think they're all good and pure, but they are not. So,
Almost like when parents say, "Oh, you're just like your father," or something when they don't like what you're doing.
yeah. So, yeah. So their pride, they think they've got it all together, but they don't. They're a mess. So, yeah.
It was just interesting to see it termed that way.
Yeah. Yeah. Good catch. Because I did have that in my notes and I didn't mention it. So, um, yeah. Any other thoughts, questions?
One more.
Yeah.
All this when he's talking about this is before the captivity, before exile.
Yeah, we don't know
Everything
exactly when all of these oracles were given, but the oracle to Egypt uh, is earlier than like Elam. Elam is during Zedekiah's reign, which was last, and Jehoiakim was 2 kings before that, right? Or the king before that. Anyway, it gets confusing. Um,
I'm so used to everything chronological order. So when, like before you last week, you said, well, everything's not always in chronological order.
right.
So this is weird seeing this and thinking, okay, was this referenced early on in when Jeremiah is prophesying, saying, "Well, this will happen, but these kingdoms that who come against Israel will be restored."
Yeah.
Is it really early on in his prophesying?
Um, yeah, some of them were earlier. I don't know exactly when. We can't know for sure when all of these were, but the reason they're all here together is because of the theme of oracles against nations.
Yeah.
So that's why if Baruch is the compiler of Jeremiah's oracles, he probably put them all here just because it's like the rest of the book is really like, hey, Jerusalem, you got to get your act together, and he focus on that. And then, afterwards, as Baruch is putting things together, he's like, Jeremiah wasn't only concerned with the people of Jerusalem. He also said these other oracles to the nations surrounding, and so he put
Right.
them all, most likely put them all together, um, so that there's just the common theme of here's the heavy message to the people of Israel. Here's God's message to the people outside of Israel.
Yeah, poor Baruch's probably like, how am I going to put these in order to make them make sense?
Yeah. Well, God promised to keep Baruch alive. We read that last week, so he's going to do whatever he's told to do. So,
Exactly. Job security.
yeah.
One other question too, when you said their gods were carried away, what do you mean the images of these things?
Yeah, the idols were taken away. The people thought that their idols, the statues, were the things that were keeping them safe. And
Hmm.
so to have them removed from their homeland, uh, in the, supernatural geography would be like, oh, they've lost their power. They're taken away from their home. Um, and so, yeah, so their security in these idols was shattered like, when Chemosh was taken away. It's like, oh, he couldn't save us. He couldn't even save himself.
Yeah,
So,
I guess I have different ideology. I would have melted the thing in front of them,
well, yeah, I mean, you
but
could do
that's not me.
that.
Not only could your thing not save you, but it's being melted now.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's the part of if you melt it down, though, you don't get a trophy back home.
Oh yeah, you don't get
So,
rain. Okay.
even in the Philistines, when they captured the ark, they took it and put it in their temple.
Mhm.
And so the reason for that is because the ark is a trophy for them. But then, Dagon fell over, and then the next day Dagon's head and hands were cut off and fell
Yeah.
over. So the trophy didn't make them feel good. So,
Yeah. Interesting how this is all played out. I guess I don't understand the tactics of war.
well, I mean, their ancient world as well. Like it's easy, it's better for the ancient world to make your enemies feel shame.
Mm,
And in an honor shame culture, like if you take their idols, you're inflicting shame on them.
mm,
And if they are shamed, they will do what you say because you are stronger and more powerful than them.
yeah.
And you're demonstrating that by taking what they value. So
Interesting.
that's a lot of it.
Yeah. Anybody else got questions?
No? Well, all right, y'all. We did a lot tonight. We went through a lot of text. Thank you for your patience. We did it. And we're almost done with Jeremiah. We're almost there, guys. We're so close. The bummer is we'll get back, and not the bummer. I'm just saying, like, we're gonna take a good long break over the summer, and we'll come back in the fall. And Ezekiel is also a large book, so we'll spend a lot of time in Ezekiel. And it's not just a large book; it's a very weird book. So, um, yeah, just prepare for that. It's gonna be weird. So, but yeah, let's wrap there, and we will be back next week. Y'all have a good night.